The Institute for Faith and Freedom at Grove City College presents Liberty Mail with the Student Fellows of Faith and Freedom.
Welcome back to Liberty Mail. I'm Libby Krieger.
And I'm Aaron Jenks.
And we are coming to you from the underground studio here at Grove City College. Before we start, I just want to give a shout out to my friend Zach, who he said he watched the previous episodes, he really liked it, and gave us some valuable insight when we go down to Pitt later this week to do some man on the street videos. He told us where the best places to go would be to get students, so thank you, Zach. Also, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you put comments down below if you have any questions for us that we can answer. We're going to start looking at those maybe next episode, just going through those, so make sure you give us some feedback there, and we will get to it.
Yeah, thanks, Zach, for giving us some insight on this upcoming video that we'll be shooting down in Pitt. We're super excited about that. We want to just get more involved with students and have students be asking more questions. So, like Libby said, if you want to say a question down in the comments, or you don't understand a certain part of the video, or you question what we think about it, please just feel free to reach out.
Also, if you have any other feedback, you can always Instagram DM our Faith and Freedom account, either one of us personally if you want, Twitter. Find a way to contact us if you have any questions.
Mm-hmm. And please share the videos to people around you that you think would enjoy it or challenge them. And so we're going to start off with the first one. We're starting with the LA County Sheriff recently came out with a statement that said he will not enforce the vax mandate that the LA has recently passed, and that goes into effect in November. And now just seeing the LA Sheriff push back, he commented a couple things, but he said that the whole issue has just become politicized in his view, and that he's not willing to lose. He said he'll lose roughly like 5 or 10% of his staff overnight if he enforces this rule. And so it kind of ties into 2 weeks ago when we talked about the councilman saying that some of this vax mandate
is unenforceable.
Is unenforceable, yeah. And so you're going to force neighbors to turn on each other, brother and brother, sister and sister. In what world do we live like that? No, those are the people you first watch out for. So there is some disconnect between those governing in LA, I believe, and then we see those actually policing. And then in a couple articles, they mentioned that even specifically firefighters are rallying heavily because they said that they were interrogated almost on they were taking like religious exemptions, and then they were getting denied those exemptions, and they said that they needed to state a health.
A medical exemption of some sort?
Medical exemption. So okay. The one comment said he was interrogated about his religious beliefs eventually before getting the vaccine mandate heads into effect.
Yeah, and I'm sure even if they are having medical exemptions, they're probably pretty narrow in efforts to really force people to get this vaccine. And how you said, what you pointed out about this is having citizens turn on other citizens, essentially. I saw something just like that on TikTok, actually, where someone was asked if they would turn in non-vaccinated coworkers for money. And they were like, I would do it for a pat on the back. Like, people are just so, even if it was a joke, everyone is willing to turn on their fellow citizen over these vaccine mandates now.
Yeah, it's really an issue of almost values in my mind, because when you think about that, like, oh, I'll turn them in for a pat on the back, or I'll turn this person in for $100, and then you think about our perspective. Hey, look, this is your neighbor. You should love on them and treat them like you'd treat your mother. Yeah. And so when you talk about these two competing values, it's like the former, that belief is come from, oh, well, you're stopping me from being able to go out to the bar on Friday night. You're stopping me from seeing my family, and they've been pushed this narrative that if you don't get the vaccine, you
are to blame.
Yeah, you're doing harm, and you're affecting these people's personal liberties. So it's a grudge or almost revenge in the fact that they're like, okay, nope, never mind about my neighbor. They're messing up my life. I'm going to mess up their life. Yeah,
exactly. Well, also, I think what is such a win about the LA County Sheriff, who's really standing against the mandate here and saying he won't enforce it, is this is how we have to push back against these progressive states mandating, or whatever, if it's a company, a state, whatever it is, this is how the people can really push back, is by protesting or standing against it in the power that they have. So the LA County Sheriff may not have all that much power, but what he does have is the power to not enforce this. And so that's giving other companies or whatever it may be the freedom to know that they won't be arrested or they won't be turned in for not enforcing it if their religious or just personal convictions align differently than the state's.
True, and to that point, when we think about how the county sheriff interacts with the citizens, it's largely on just on the street and with local businesses. I mean, you don't think of a huge corporation in the middle of the city interacting with the sheriff office. You just think of that local corner store that is dealing with the cop coming in because of, I don't know, teenagers. And so he's not going to stop these people from, these blue-collar folk that majority of this mandate, I feel like, will affect. He's not going to, it's good for him that he won't enforce
It's not
this.
his first priority. Also, I know that California has a serious homelessness crisis going on. So maybe this is not his first priority, too, to be outing other citizens for different personal convictions that don't align with the state's. Probably has other actual issues like crime to deal with that are more important to the direct safety of those in LA.
Yeah, let's think about if he did enforce this. Like, I feel like that's almost like a jab to all of these citizens, and
That's a nice pun.
unintended. But when we think about let's think about like the popular narrative of what Americans have had to go through in the past 2 years, and whether it's financially, COVID, health, and then family loss. And then you're going to say, okay, well, you're going to lose your job if you don't do this. And people are strong-willed. They're stubborn. They're going to do what they want to do. You can't really force it on people, no matter what it is. In any policy, it's going to happen. So it just goes against the popular narrative that you see in either politicians or the news that, hey, we're there for you, the common American. We see you struggling. We're going to do everything we can to help you. And then this like mandate, if it's enforceable, or if he enforces it, if they enforce it, it's just going to go against that.
Yeah. You have, I think, one of a few different possibilities that would be the outcome if he started enforcing this is you either have people who would just get the vaccine because, I mean, at the end of the day, if it's putting food on the table for your family versus getting the vaccine, you might just do it, even if that is against your personal beliefs. Just because your family, like that is immediately you're going to see the ramifications of your decision by struggling with your family. Another opportunity, or one other thing that could happen is just civil war. I'm not saying that would actually lead to an actual civil war, but I mean, you have a lot of protests. You could have some violence when people, their lives are on the line and their livelihood is on the line. I think you'd have a lot of pushback if there was actually people starting to get arrested or whatever the enforcement would look like.
And I can definitely see someone being like, okay, well, it's a really small portion of the population that would be affected by this, and like almost a utilitarian view or aspect on this, and because they state in all of these articles that 70% of residents are fully vaccinated, and 78% have received their first dose. However, why
doesn't that mean 78% are protected then?
Somewhat. First dose, they need the second, need a booster shot. Nevertheless, but I don't like that utilitarian view that, okay, well, we have the majority of people covered. This mandate will affect a minority of people. That doesn't fit with our Christian view at the Faith and Freedom here. So
Wait, expand on that a little more.
So I just feel like from our perspective of conservatism, working for the Institute of Faith and Freedom, and then here at Grove City, we have these Christian morals that, okay, almost our theology, and that's kind of fits into our philosophy of how we look at things, that we're not going to look at one problem and see, okay, what affects the majority of people, what helps the majority of people, and then kind of push away the minority of people. We look at every single person, and each person is valuable in that fact that they're not better than the next person.
Oh, you're saying just because this this is for like the majority of people doesn't mean it's necessarily the best decision, because we should consider everyone?
Yeah, because the mandate's going in place for a minority of people, like roughly 22% or 30%, however you want to look at it. And if they did enforce it, then they're like, okay, you're the minority. We're going to put this policy on you because it's helpful to the rest of us. And that is the utilitarian view.
But it's harmful to the minority.
That is harmful to them, yeah.
Gotcha. Very interesting. Well, so clearly California is going hard on these vaccine mandates, and that's why LA is pushing back. But a state that is doing pretty well with the vaccine mandates, or not having vaccine mandates, is Texas. So late last night, so we're filming this Tuesday morning. It was Monday evening. Governor Greg Abbott of Texas banned any entity from requiring vaccines. I think this is a huge win. It was by executive order. So I would have preferred had it been the legislature. Just the constitutionalist in me would have preferred that. But Governor Abbott did also say he would like the legislature to move along these lines and put something into place that has the same effect. But I do think it's a good move because he's using the political power that he has as a conservative. Many states the conservatives don't have political power. And so he's doing that to push back on these draconian mandates, forcing people to either choose between the livelihood of their family or their personal discretion.
Now, before we go deeper into this, I want to touch on what you said, that the constitutionalist in you, it kind of like irks at this, right? Because you see the executive power flexing, and you're like, I would have had the legislative. Can you just like talk to our listeners how the conservative view sees this?
Yeah, so I guess there could be several different conservative views on this. I think,
Correct,
well, the constitutionalist one is because the legislature is the lawmaking body, something like this that would be like a sweeping legislation for the state should be done by the legislature. And that's why it's the most connected to the people, so it represents the people's input the most. And also it is a slower process because they want to make sure it can't just be done by the flip of a switch. So it would take longer, and it might be more representative of what the population thinks. But then at the same time, the other part of me is like, well, if we have this power now, we need to, at least in this case, maybe it's the prudential argument, just because this is something that is coming down very fast. People's lives could be ruined by this if they are forced, or maybe not ruined, but they're going to be forced to make a decision. And I think this is a good thing that he is standing up against this, at least in the time being, telling schools, private businesses, local governments, all of that you can't force someone. Because I think what's more important in this scenario is that we are not forced to take the vaccine.
The mandate, yeah. A really interesting part of that, which I thought you hit, was that like the rule of law in conservatism and like the holding to that as a value. So when we have these systems of law in the government, so we're talking specifically about executive and legislature. Yeah, so that balance of power. It's very few times that we want to break that, and like that's why it's really interesting to watch you struggle with it, almost, because you're like, okay, this goes against our rule of law. Almost like 9 out of 10 times don't want to see this.
It's like competing values.
Broken, it's competing values. So I don't want to see this broken because I know what it's in place
Slippery
for.
slope,
Slippery slope. Sometimes don't like that argument because like I remember just talking like almost like logic and like arguments.
It's like a fallacy. Yeah.
And so, but
there is truth to it. Like once if we are fine with Texas doing this just because they're on our side, doesn't mean we're okay with California doing this with something else. No, it's just because we agree with Texas in this case.
This is where I felt more at home with conservatism, because when like either I'm talking to people, for like you as example, or any of my other friends, when like something goes against what we believe in like the smallest sense of like a rule break or I don't know, any example, we call each other out for it and we like question it, and there's a constant like give and take process instead of like I see sometimes just on the left friends that like it can almost be contradictory, and you're like, wait, you just said this, why are you going to do this? You said you hold on to these beliefs, but you're implementing this. I'm questioning that. And they're like, well, we want to get our priorities done, and so what we believe in can take a backseat to what our priorities do. And then in
the
conservatism,
principles take a backseat to the narrative that they're pushing. But that's where I understand that the left, they play
good
really
politics.
well. They play politics, and that's where I think we can take some lessons from them. At least very narrow instances, at least. Like I don't think we should put our principles in the backseat by any means. But something like this where I think it is a very pertinent, like this is something that's happening right now, and if we don't do something about it right now, there will be ramifications. And that's where I'm okay with doing it. But also, yeah, the progressives do this so well. And you never see them be like, oh, we should let the legislature do this, actually, because we love the Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what happens. They say, we have the power now, so we're going to do what we believe because this is what needs to be done. And for that case, I have a lot of respect sometimes for the fact that they do care so much about what they believe in or what they don't want, that they're willing to do what they need to do with their political power.
Gotcha.
I know it's a competing struggle because I'm a constitutionalist, but I'm also really against these mandates. So I'm sure a lot of conservatives probably, if you think deeper about it, you also have this struggle of competing interests.
Mm-hmm. Just the fact that like conservatives are just like irked about it, and they're like holding on. They're like, don't do that. Okay, Abbott. Like, but appreciate what you're doing because we see New York, California instituting mandates.
Yeah. Well, also because I guess this is also pushing back more against the Biden administration's federal overreach of the OSHA mandate, which I saw somewhere that actually wasn't an executive order. It was just kind of like the media was talking about it, and like it hasn't been put into law yet. I will have to do a little more research on that.
Like code? Almost
yeah,
like
it's not
code.
like codified yet. But yeah, I think because it is pushing back against another federal overreach, like of executive power, like you're fighting fire with fire.
Yeah, that's an interesting like point of view. I'd really like can we imagine like we sit Governor Abbott down. We're like, okay, what reasons did you do this for? Please say you did this to fight back against federal overreach. He's like, yes, good job.
Immediately, yes. Yeah, because I'm reading this Daily Caller article, and it said Abbott also called on the state legislature to pass a law with the same effect as the executive order, and saying he would rescind his order when such legislation was passed. So he's pushing the legislature to follow his lead, and so he's kind of admitting in that it would be better if the legislature did this because it's more of their role. But I think the timeliness of the vaccine mandate issue is what kind of led him to take immediate action. So in the end, despite the competing interests and like despite the inner conflict that arises in me from this, I still call this a win for liberty because the vaccine mandates I think are just so terrible.
Yeah, really happy with what Governor Abbott's doing in Texas with this. Hopefully we see fellow like conservative states to follow lead because, I mean,
Florida basically did that too. So
yeah, like even if they don't, I feel like at one point in time over the next year, they might be like there might be a really sudden push to get that mandate into effect, and they're going to be like almost like on their back foot.
Oh, like
and
now we need to do this,
and not able to act. So
maybe preliminarily it would be better to.
Yeah,
do that now.
Being proactive instead of reactive. We like seeing that as a win.
Exactly. So the last win of the week kind of connects a little bit to the first in the sense police is like the major topic. But so you're seeing major cities across America kind of walk back the defund the police movement. So one startling example of this, I guess startling to the left, good for us, but the New York City Democratic primary, I believe they elected for the primary Eric Adams, who was a former New York police officer or NYPD commissioner or something, or sheriff, something of that sort. And he ran on increased police presence and kind of hitting back against the crime because we have seen tons of crime over the past year raised through all across the United States. And I think that's something that is really concerning. Let's see the statistic here. U.S. national violent crime increased by 5.6% in 2020. And whether that is a response to the defund the police movement, the anti-police movement that we saw really arise in 2020, or if it's other, maybe like due to COVID, people have more free time, so they're just getting in trouble more. I don't know exactly what the cause is, but the effect clearly is concerning. And so I think it's a really good thing that we're seeing Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey. So that's where all of this started with the death of George Floyd. They asked for increased money, I think nearly $28 million increase from the allocated amount for 2021 for the police department. And they were one of the cities that moved to abolish the police department. So I think they're kind of seeing the consequences of their own actions by decreasing funding in places that really need police presence to enforce the law and even just be a deterrent. So I think this is a win because it's more like ordered liberty. Like, you need order. And liberty, we talk about the Liberty Mail is the title of the podcast, and we talk a lot about wins for liberty and wins for conservatism. But conservatism is about ordered liberty. So I think that is kind of what we're seeing here is we need the law and order, and we're seeing cities move back to that.
Absolutely. So real quick, what was the 1% you read off?
This was, let's see, in another Daily Caller article. Thank you, Daily Caller. According to FBI data, U.S. national violent crime rate increased by 5.6% in 2020.
So that's just a national. So I had NewYorkCity.gov website, and they had an overall index crime rose 22%.
Rose 22%?
Rose 22%. And then driven by increase in robberies, majority, and then grand larceny and felony assault. Murder
increased 30% in 2022.
So when we talk about the rule of law in New York City specifically, we're just talking about, well, we want police presence because that dramatically decreases crime. The thought that, okay, I see that cop there, I can get caught. There's psychological motives behind that decrease these statistics. And then when we see these defund the police movements, then you see the opposite. Okay, crime's increasing. So,
like, police, I don't remember the statistic, but police response time went up quite a bit. And so if you're going to commit a crime, you have that much more time to get away without being caught.
Absolutely, yeah. And just the fact that people aren't trying to, like, reform the police. Okay, let's put more money into it to fix the problems that we're seeing. Because if we're going to talk about this whole, like, okay, we see them walking back on this, and even Democratic candidates are like, no, we need to rethink how we're doing this.
Yeah.
Okay, that goes against the general narrative that you'll see on either, like, Twitter or any social media platform. And so it's really good for liberty that we see leaders in the political process pushing back on this, and not only just voices
just the people
in the community. Yeah, because we need these people, and specifically we need Democrats. People would call them moderate Democrats, but Democrats to push back on this, and especially a Democrat that worked in the police department, knows the police department.
That's huge.
He's very knowledgeable on the situation. He goes, no. We need to either reform it. What was he?
Sorry, New York Police Department Captain Eric Adams. That's to correct myself earlier.
Oh, Captain. Okay. So this man knows what he's talking about.
He knows.
He's a respectable figure. We'll see what happens in New York City. We'll be following that story.
Yeah, I think that's a huge indication of New York City, a progressive city, and that's the Democratic primary voters. Those are the ones who elected the candidate who ran on fighting violent crime and improving the police department. So I think that's a really big indicator of where maybe the broader country is at, especially if these are maybe more liberal voters too already. Most of the conservatives were already on that side, but to see maybe a shift of moderates or some liberals too who are for that as well, I think is a really good thing. Also, we were talking about some of the other statistics. So Dallas saw a 25% increase in homicides in 2020 as well. So all across the board, this is something that clearly affected crime, is to have this defund the police movement.
Can we bring Morgan Freeman up real quick?
Yeah, you go for it.
Okay. So
I know you love Morgan Freeman.
Freeman was commented talking about, he was asked about these movements of defunding the police and then how they related to the increase in crime. And Morgan Freeman was quoted saying, he said, I am not in the least bit for defunding the police. Police work is, aside from all the negativity around it, very necessary for us to have them, and most of them are guys that are doing a great job. So
cultural win there.
Yeah, it's almost like, it seems like it's a common sense where you're like, okay, I know that my son goes to school with this police officer's son, and they meet together, I don't know, at the parent meeting conference, at whatever it is, and so they're neighbors in the community, and people that are involved, they know this, that not majority of cops, that they're good people working.
And of course there are bad cops. Like literally any group, you're going to have good people and bad people, no matter what.
And I hate to make it like that the argument, because it's like I feel like when we're talking to the progressive left and they're arguing about defunding the police, like they're gonna be like, well, it's not about that, it's not about that, and so we almost have to hit, but we like bring all these like aspects of what it is about, and
because there's so many things that go into each issue, but I just feel like it cuts so against, well, for one, the oh my goodness, can't speak, hypocrisy of the fact that lots of these progressive politicians have armed guards everywhere they go, but then they don't want their constituents to have police presence. If the police are in, like, guns are so terrible, then you should be the first one being willing to defund your security then. If you're willing to let everyone else suffer the consequences of these increased homicide and violent crime, then you should be the first one to take the brunt of it.
It's really nice to see what we feel as, like if we think about Morgan Freeman, we think of him as a left-leaning
I don't know what his
individual
political affiliation is,
Yeah,
to be
you just
honest.
kind of like think of Hollywood and you think, okay, liberal.
Yeah, it's a good assumption.
Yeah, so when we like see that, or we even see Democratic mayor candidates, and we see this narrative of them pushing back against what's the common narrative.
Yeah.
It's such
Maybe
like
a
a optimist
feeling,
like
for
pushing
once,
through.
I'm optimistic.
Good. And when we look back at like it was 3 weeks, I think now, the left and like atheist and LGBTQ pro-life group that was pushing back.
I almost wonder if there's like a realignment that we're just kind of like living in the middle of, because you can often look back and see it and it's like, oh, that was so clear. But when you're in it, I don't think it's as clear. And I wonder if this is something that maybe happened as a result of the Trump era. You're seeing more of like a, I don't know, like anti-establishment altogether. Or just in the establishment, like the elites. I wonder if that's the realignment that we're seeing, or
my whole
I don't
thinking
know. It'll be interesting.
over this past, however, is like, okay, we've seen extremes, and like your common American is just not in that party. Like you have like a 10% to the left and maybe like a 10% to the right, and then just whopping 80% in the middle. And so Democrats and Republicans alike are like, no, we're going to push back on this. But then it's very nice to see Democrats act like them specifically pushing back, because conservatives are always like, no, they call it out, but see what they do. Yeah,
I feel like there's a lot of people who feel not welcome in either party, or not necessarily not welcome, but they don't feel like they fit the like narrative or the stereotype of either party. So they're kind of like in the middle and not really sure where to align themselves with, but it seems like now we're seeing, because the progressive, I think, are moving so far to the left with mandating vaccines and stuff like that. Like, President Biden said he was not for vaccine or even mask mandates, I think maybe December or months ago. But now he is. He's forcing this on the American people. And I think you're going to see a lot of pushback on stuff like that. And even just like, I think like common sense measures like defunding the police is clearly not a good idea. These cities are seeing the ramifications of that. So I think a lot of maybe everyday Americans in the middle are going to be realigning shortly.
I agree. And when you see leaders amongst them realigning, then it's for sure to follow that the constituents will actually push towards those candidates. So it's a weird analogy, but I talk about like...
I'm ready. I'm getting ready. Analogy, I don't know what this is.
Like when you think of restaurants, right?
Okay.
Restaurants that have good food, people flock to. They stay open. They don't need good marketing. It just happens. Word gets around,
true.
Word of mouth. So when you have good, either like common sense candidates, people, I believe, will go towards that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the free market with anything. Like, you have a good store, you're going to go there.
There you go. Bring it back to...
free market. But yeah, I think so. That probably ties up our wins of the week. We'll be going down to Pitt later this week, so get
Super
ready.
Excited about that.
Aaron will be probably editing those videos over break. Really fun fall break activity for him. And our producer Z will be putting those on the screen next week, so we'll do some live reacts.
Hopefully we'll get this going.
Yeah, we'll get that going, so that will be really fun to just like put up some clips and react to them in person, and that would be especially nice to watch on YouTube also, so you can see them as well. But if not, you'll just hear the audio. Yeah,
thank you all for supporting us. We saw like one video had 13,000 views, and I was like, what? That doesn't happen.
And that's not including Spotify and Apple Music, so that's exciting.
Yeah, just on YouTube. But thank you so much. Subscribe to the Faith and Freedom
channel
yes. on YouTube. If you want to hit the bell, that'd be awesome.
Hit the bell.
And then I'm pretty sure the like button's like right here if you're watching. So
somewhere down
just
there.
Like click it up. We only had 2 downvotes or dislikes. Sorry to you people.
Hey, well, I think that means you're doing something right. So keep them coming, and that means we're just getting a bigger platform. So thank you all so much.
Thank you.
For more information on this podcast or other programs, please visit faithandfreedom.com.